November 4th, 957. Red Square, Moscow. Snow drifts lazily through the cold air, settling on the shoulders of soldiers standing in rigid formation. Military bands echo off the Kremlin walls as Nikita Khrushchev, first secretary of the Communist Party, steps forward to address the crowd. Above him, banners celebrate Soviet power, Soviet science, Soviet destiny. Just weeks earlier, the Soviet Union shocked the world by launching Ankorksv Sputnik U, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. Now, Khrushchev is riding that shockwave with confidence bordering on swagger. Our rockets, he boasts, can fly like sausages off a machine. The crowd roars. Western journalists scribble frantically. Somewhere across the Atlantic, American intelligence officers listen carefully and feel a knot tighten in their stomachs, because Khrushchev isn't just talking about satellites, he's talking about missiles. In Washington, the phrase has already taken hold. The missile gap. Baingstou. The fear that the Soviet Union has surged ahead in intercontinental ballistic missiles, enough to overwhelm U.S. defenses and deliver nuclear warheads anywhere on Earth. Inside the Pentagon, fluorescent lights buzz late into the night. Maps of the Soviet Union line the walls. Analysts trace possible missile trajectories with grease pencils. Reports pile up on desks marked top secret. No one knows the real numbers, and the Soviets are not helping. Throughout the late 1950s, Soviet leadership actively feeds the illusion. Military parades showcase massive rockets rolling through Moscow. The R-7 Semyorka, the world's first ICBM. State media claims production is soaring. Khrushchev openly mocks American fears, calling them paranoid, while quietly encouraging them. Behind closed doors, Soviet generals smile. They know the West is guessing. What the West doesn't know is that many of those parade missiles are empty shells. Some are rolled out again and again, repainted, renumbered, paraded like actors in a carefully staged play. The R-7, though powerful, is cumbersome, requiring hours to fuel, vulnerable to preemptive strike, and produced in painfully small numbers. But illusion is its own weapon. In the United States, the political stakes explode. During the 1960 presidential campaign, Senator John F. Kennedy warns that America is falling behind, that the Eisenhower administration has allowed a dangerous missile gap to open. The phrase becomes a rallying cry, repeated in speeches, headlines, and classified briefings alike. Air Force generals push for more funding, more missiles, more bombers, more everything. Yet uncertainty reigns. U-2 spy planes fly high above the Soviet Union, capturing grainy photographs of airfields and missile sites. But even at 70,000 feet, much remains hidden. Clouds, deception, distance. And then, on May 1st, 1960, the illusion hardens. High above Sverdlovsk, a U-2 piloted by Albert Francis Gary Powers is struck by a Soviet SA-2 surface-to-air missile. The aircraft disintegrates. Powers survives and is captured alive. When Khrushchev reveals the pilot to the world days later, American credibility collapses. The Paris summit disintegrates in diplomatic chaos. And the most reliable source of U.S. intelligence on Soviet missile capability is suddenly gone. The missile gap feels terrifyingly real. Inside the Kremlin, laughter echoes through closed offices. Soviet generals read Western newspapers with satisfaction. They listened to American debates with disbelief. The United States, with its sprawling industrial base, is panicking over a threat that barely exists. But arrogance has a shelf life. Because even as the U-2 program burns, a new eye is opening above the Earth. In quiet facilities in California and Maryland, American engineers are working on something unprecedented. Machines that do not fly over enemy territory, but around the planet. Satellites that cannot be shot down without starting a war. Cameras that see from space. They have names that never appear in headlines. Corona, Discoverer, Keyhole. Their success is uncertain. Film capsules must survive launch, orbit, re-entry, and mid-air recovery. Many fail spectacularly. Some vanish forever. But the pressure is relentless, because if the missile gap is real, the clock is ticking. And if it isn't, someone needs proof. Proof strong enough to silence laughter in Moscow and fear in Washington. August 18, 1960. Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. The Pacific fog hangs low over the launch pad, rolling in slow, silent waves that dampen sound and swallow distance. Floodlights cut pale cones through the mist, illuminating the thin, skeletal shape of a Thor Agena rocket standing upright against the night sky. It does not look powerful. It looks fragile, a stack of metal cylinders balanced on hope, math, and deadlines. Inside the blockhouse, engineers stare at their consoles. Most of them are young. Too young, some think, to be holding the weight of national survival in their hands. They wear white shirts, narrow ties, sleeves rolled up, collars darkened with sweat. Cigarette smoke curls toward the ceiling, mixing with the smell of warm electronics. This launch is different. There are no press cameras, no speeches, no applause waiting at the end. The payload is classified under layers of cover stories and euphemisms. Officially, it is another Discoverer satellite, a scientific experiment. In reality, it is something far more dangerous. Corona, America's first true photographic reconnaissance satellite. For years, intelligence has relied on risk. Pilots flying alone over hostile territory, trusting altitude to protect them. That era ended over Sverdlovsk. Now, the United States is blind. Corona is the gamble to see again. At T-minus 10 seconds, the blockhouse falls silent. Every man knows the statistics. Most Corona missions have failed so far. Rockets explode, satellites tumble, film capsules burn up on re-entry or vanish into the ocean forever. But failure is no longer acceptable, because back in Washington, the missile gap has hardened into policy. Defense budgets swell. Minuteman missile silos spread across the Midwest. Strategic Air Command keeps bombers on constant alert, engines running, crews sleeping beside their aircraft. The logic is simple. If the Soviets really do have hundreds of missiles, America must match or exceed them. And yet, no one has proof. 3, 2, 1. The rocket ignites. A violent bloom of fire erupts beneath the pad, lighting the fog from below. The Thor rises slowly, almost reluctantly, then gathers speed, clawing upward through cloud and darkness. The ground shakes. Coffee cups rattle. One engineer grips the edge of his console until his knuckles whiten. If this fails, they may not get another chance before decisions become irreversible. Minutes later, the rocket clears the atmosphere. Telemetry streams in, uneven, jittery, but alive. Applause breaks out, brief and restrained. No one celebrates yet, because orbit is only half the battle. Days pass. Corona circles the Earth in silence, its camera snapping frame after frame of Soviet territory as the planet spins beneath it. Missile fields, rail yards, air bases, vast empty stretches of steppe where intelligence once imagined hidden silos. Then comes the hardest part, re-entry. Over the Pacific Ocean, a small blunt-nosed film capsule separates from the satellite and plunges back toward Earth at hypersonic speed. If its heat shield fails, the evidence burns. If it lands in the wrong place, it is lost forever. 2 U.S. Air Force C-119 flying boxcar aircraft patrol the recovery zone. Flying low and slow, crews staring upward through open rear doors, grappling hooks ready. The capsule punches through the clouds, trailing a parachute. A crewman shouts, The aircraft banks hard. The hook snags the parachute line mid-air, jerking the capsule aboard before it can hit the sea. Men cheer openly now. Some laugh. One simply sits down, overwhelmed. The film makes it back to Washington under armed guard. Inside a secure facility, intelligence analysts wait as technicians develop the images. The room smells of chemicals and tension. Frames slide into focus one by one, and with each image, a truth begins to emerge. There are missile sites, but far fewer than expected. Launch pads appear unfinished. Some are abandoned. Others exist only on paper. The feared mass deployment simply isn't there. Analysts exchange glances. One man removes his glasses and rubs his eyes, then looks again. They count and recount. The numbers do not change. The missile gap is not in America's favor. It never was. As more Corona missions succeed, the picture sharpens. The Soviet Union possesses dozens of ICBMs, not hundreds. Their rockets are powerful, but scarce, vulnerable. Nowhere near the unstoppable force Khrushchev has been boasting about in Red Square. The laughter in Moscow suddenly feels premature. In Washington, the mood shifts. Fear gives way to calculation. When President John F. Kennedy is briefed, he listens carefully, expression unreadable. He asks pointed questions. Are they sure? How reliable is this? What about deception? The answers are measured, but confident. For the first time in the Cold War, the United States is not guessing. It is seeing, and with sight comes restraint. The intelligence will not be made public. It cannot be. But it will shape every major decision to come, from arms control negotiations to crisis management in places like Berlin and Cuba. High above the earth, silent satellites continue their work, indifferent to politics, photographing reality as it is, not as leaders claim it to be. And slowly, quietly, the balance of terror becomes something else. A balance of knowledge. October 16th, 1962. The Cabinet Room, the White House. Morning light filters through tall windows, falling across a long, polished table crowded with men who have not slept enough. Coffee cups sit untouched. Ashtrays are already full. The tension in the room is thick, not explosive, controlled, compressed, like a held breath. President John F. Kennedy sits at the head of the table, jacket off, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest fatigue without weakness. Spread before him are photographs. Stark, grainy, unmistakable. Missiles. Soviet missiles in Cuba. But Kennedy's reaction is not panic, because this time he knows something Khrushchev does not. The images came from the same silent watchers that exposed the myth of the missile gap. Reconnaissance satellites and high-altitude intelligence refined in secrecy. The same system that proved the Soviet Union was not 10 feet tall, not invincible, not ready for a nuclear first strike. The missile gap had vanished years earlier, and with it, a dangerous illusion. Inside the room, generals speak carefully. They recommend airstrikes, invasions, decisive action. The language is firm, confident, the tone of men trained to act, not wait. But Kennedy listens differently than his predecessors might have, because unlike Eisenhower, unlike Truman, he now commands something no American president before him possessed: near complete visibility of Soviet strategic reality. He knows how many ICBMs the USSR actually has. He knows how long they take to prepare. He knows how vulnerable they are. And most importantly, he knows Khrushchev knows none of this has been revealed. The balance of terror has shifted quietly, invisibly, years before this moment. Back in Moscow, Khrushchev paces inside the Kremlin, surrounded by advisors who still believe their own performance. They remember Red Square, the cheers, the laughter at American fear. They assume the West remains blind. They are wrong. When Kennedy chooses a naval quarantine instead of immediate attack, it is not weakness. It is calculation grounded in knowledge. He understands escalation curves now, understands how much pressure the Soviet system can endure before snapping. Days stretch into nights. American destroyers shadow Soviet ships. U-2 flights continue. Satellites pass overhead, orbit after orbit, photographing reality without emotion. Every briefing Kennedy receives is anchored in evidence, not estimates, not fear, not rhetoric. Behind the scenes, the numbers matter. Soviet ICBMs, limited. Launch readiness, slow. Second strike capability, fragile. These facts restrain American hands as much as they empower them, and they save the world. When the crisis ends, when Khrushchev agrees to withdraw the missiles, the public narrative frames it as a showdown of wills. Strength versus strength. Courage versus courage. The truth is quieter. It is a victory of information. Years later, as arms control talks begin, the Limited Test Ban Treaty. Then, SALT. The satellite photographs sit at the foundation of every negotiation. Each side knows the other can see. Bluff becomes dangerous. Lies become measurable. The Cold War does not end, but it becomes more stable. Less theatrical, more restrained. The laughter that once echoed in Kremlin offices fades. Not because Soviet power disappears, but because it is finally seen clearly. And in Washington, the fear that once drove budgets and bombers never fully returns. Because the missile gap was never real. It was a shadow, cast by secrecy, magnified by politics, and dissolved by a camera circling silently above the earth. In the end, the most powerful weapon of the Cold War is not a missile or a bomb or an army. It is knowledge, cold, precise, unblinking. And once humanity learned how to see itself clearly from space, the world became, paradoxically, a little safer.